arguing because I have the stronger feet and we all had on heels. They didn't want to get back out of the car.
So they stayed in the car and you walked in by yourself?
Yes.
When you walked in, what did you do?
I sat at the bar area and I just stood around for a moment because I figured it wasn't ready just yet, plus they were very busy.
All right. As you sat at the bar, did you talk to anybody?
I didn't. I was observing my surroundings. I did notice Tia and Mr. De Silva in the window. I thought it was sweet how they interacted with each other, actually. I noticed how he was just about ordering her food for her. Thought that was sweet.
All right. And then tell us what happened, that how this all started with regards to the shooting.
Well, like I said, I was standing there, well, sitting and standing, a bit of both, at the time, waiting for their food. And all of a sudden, and I do mean sudden, there was a loud pop over my left shoulder. There was I felt something on my face. I didn't know at the time it was debris, it was glass. But in a split second, I wanted to turn over my left shoulder actually and curse some people out because I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know where this force was coming from on the side of my face. But instead, I made the decision to just fall to my side. And then I continued to hear what I know now was gunshots ring out. And I heard the cook behind the counter say to take cover, someone was shooting.
All right, so when you went down on the ground, did you just go down in the middle of the floor?
No, I did not. I fell away from the impact, so I fell to my right side, and I fell on my shoulder.
All right, and you had been seated at some of the chairs right there at the counter.
Correct.
Folks that order and actually eat at the counter, or if you're just sitting there waiting for your food for takeout, right?
Right, the bar area.
All right, so in relation to where the chair was and the counter, where did you fall?
In a very small and uncomfortable slide. I had to slide under the bar, and if you sat at a Waffle House, you know that the bar stools do not move. So I had to slide around the chair cushion and in between the bar area. So I actually hit quite a bit of things on the way down, but yeah, I fell in that area.
All right, so you did not fall into the area where people walk. You were between the stools and the solid partition that was what the counter sits on.
Correct.
But then under the counter as well.
Right.
All right. All right. When you heard those other shots, what did you do?
I made the decision to lie still and breathless. I decided to play dead because I figured that was my only chances. Where am I gonna go? I have nowhere to hide. I'm exposed. I played dead.
All right. Did you ever look up?
Unfortunately, a moment I did glance up. I seen Mr. Reinking's puny scrotum in that moment because unfortunately he was unclothed, just a jacket.
But you could not see his face at that point.
No.
Right. All right. And then after you peeked up, did you then go back to keeping your eyes closed and laying still?
I did. I was very still after that.
All right. Did you hear more shots at that point?
I did not.
Okay. What was the next thing you heard?
I heard rustling. I heard furniture moving. That's what I would say. And then a dead silence.
Okay.
Still.
All right. When you heard the wrestling, you had your eyes closed. Is that correct?
I did.
So that's why you didn't see what was happening when the fight was going on.
Correct. I did not.
All right. All right. How long did you lay there still, to the best of your recollection?
It had to be about, I don't know, 45, 30 seconds.
All right. at some point you got up. Why did you get up?
I got up because I heard people moving. I heard people behind the counter moving, and I thought I had to take my chance to take cover. I did not know where the shooter was at the time.
All right, so when you got up, what did you do?
I got up and I ran around the counter to where the workers work, and as I was running around the counter, I unfortunately slipped in Mr. De Silva's blood. Right where I fell is where Shatia was sitting, and I was face to face with her dismembered leg.
All right, could you tell that her leg was dismembered at that point?
Most definitely.
All right.
Most definitely.
What did you do then?
Honestly, in a moment of shock, I ran to my faith. I prayed over Shatia's leg, and I tried to save myself, and I got out of there.
All right. When you ran out of the Waffle House, did you see Mr. Reinking at that point?
While I was running out of the Waffle House, no.
And were you able to see James Shaw at that point?
No.
All right. Now you're Kayla Shaw, he's James Shaw. Are y'all any relation at all?
None at all, but now he is my honorary cousin.
Okay, good. But you did not know him that night, did you? All right.
Not at all.
All right. When you ran out, you didn't see Mr. Reinking or Mr. Shaw. Where did you go when you ran outside?
I went directly to the Nissan Sentra. I had bagged into the second row. I got into the driver's seat, and I drove off.
Okay. And were Chelsea Owens and Alexis Peebles, were they in the car still?
They were.
All right. Where did you go when you drove off?
I went down the street, so that was headed towards the Thorns gas station that was right there. I made a right, and I went down that road, and ended up stopping at a Shell station. That's where the dispatcher instructed us to stop and wait for a police officer.
Okay. Who was on the phone with 911?
At the time, both Chelsea and Alexis were on the phone with two different dispatchers.
All right. Did you wait there until the police came?
We did.
As you were driving between the Waffle House and the gas station where you stopped, did you see anybody along the side of the road?
Yes, actually, I seen Mr. Reinking running.
All right. How crowded was the road between the Waffle House and the gas station?
Not very. Like it, as y'all know, it was like 4 o'clock in the morning. Very minimal cars, probably like 3 max.
Okay. All right. What injuries did you sustain?
Scratches, lacerations to my face from the debris of the glass. I suffered a minor shoulder injury. I had a sling for about 2 weeks, bruises, discomfort.
Okay. From the gas station, were you transported to Southern Hills?
Yes, Chelsea actually drove me to Southern Hills.
And that's where you were treated and released that night?
Yes. Also, that's where I met James that night.
Okay. All right. We've got a previously introduced exhibit 3, and we'd like to go to video 4. All right, Ms. Shaw, do you see, oh, it's not up yet. Okay, do you see your car in this picture before we even start the video?
Yes, I do.
If you would just kind of touch the screen where your car is, right there. Okay? I think we can take that. Can we?
Menu, and then clear.
Okay, great. And we're gonna go ahead and start this video, and if you could just narrate it for us and explain where you are and what you're doing.
I'm getting out of the car at this point, approaching the Waffle House, about to see if the food is ready. I never noticed that he was pulling up right as I was walking in. I'm going into the Waffle House. Standing around waiting on service. Well, not actually waiting on service because, like I said, we had already ordered, but giving them time because they were busy. Checking out the scene. As I said, they were busy, so I was just standing around, giving them time. Notice Mr. De Silva and Tia. As I said, I thought it was sweet that he basically ordered her food for her. I never noticed BJ and James because, I didn't know he was about to save my life, so whatever. I was waiting because I just knew that their order wasn't ready. So I never really even approached the worker because obviously you could see what's ready and what's not ready, and their food wasn't. So I was just sitting, waiting. A little impatient, actually. Especially for someone who didn't even want to be at the Waffle House. I don't eat Waffle House, let the record show, never did. Stand up, boom, that's the second. Yeah, like I said, I failed. There was a slight moment where I had to decide if I was going to turn around and explode out of anger or I was going to fall. Happy I decided to fall. I'm hiding, breathless at this moment. I hear them. I have no clue what's going on right now. I'm waiting. Because like I said, I don't know what's going on. My eyes are closed. didn't know where the shooter was. The best thing to do was just continue to be still like I had been. At this time, I'm hearing people move, so I'm about to get up. I'm positioning myself to get up. As I said, I have to move around the bar, the cushions, the stationary seats. I'm getting up, about to run around the bar frantically. I slip and I fall, and Mr. De Silva's blood.
And what did you slip on?
Mr. De Silva's blood. I was running on my heels, so it was slippery. I fell, like I said. And in this moment, I'm breathing, I'm thinking, I'm afraid, I'm seeing this blood. I'm trying to assess myself for any damages, and I'm seeing to his leg. I did say a few words over her leg before I left out of bed. And like I said as well, I was assessing myself because now I have blood all over me, so I didn't know if I was hit, my adrenaline was rushing. I just knew I had to go. And I got up and I honestly, I lost it for a second. And then I was like, no, I gotta go. Fall flat out the door in heels. Dodge the car. Get into the center. Start it up. I get out of there. I go around the curve entrance. And yeah, I proceed down the street.
All right. You said that you had injuries from glass. Mm-hmm. Where were the injuries from the glass?
The injuries from the glass were on my face. Like I said, it was just minor little scratches and lacerations. That was physical. The mental damage is forever.
And with regards to the glass, was there a point where you or someone else was pulling glass actually out of your face?
Yes, there was actually a small piece lodged in my face. Yeah.
Right. But you were treated and released, so you got some minor
I did. I had
bandages
bandages on my face. I had a sling from my shoulder that was very bruised. Mm-hmm.
Right. And did all this happen in Nashville, Davidson County?
It did.
Good morning, Ms. Shaw.
Good morning.
I just got a few questions for you.
Yes.
And my questions will pick up. We just saw in the video where you had gotten back in the vehicle and y'all drove off the parking lot onto Murfreesboro Road.
Correct.
Okay, you recall that. So that evening, you said you drove onto Murfreesboro Road and then you basically got away from there, and then at some point you were interviewed by a detective. Do you recall that morning?
Yes.
And does the name Detective Summerall ring a bell to you at all?
No, not at all.
Okay, but you recall talking to a detective
Right.
about that. And do you recall telling that detective that day that after y'all got in the car and you got on Murfreesboro Road and you were driving down the road, that you actually saw Mr. Reinking, who was nude at that point in time?
I did.
Okay. And do you recall telling Officer Summerall that Mr. Reinking was actually walking on the shoulder of the road without any clothes? Do you recall telling him that?
I might have said walking, but yes.
Alrighty. Thank you.
No regret. Thank you, Ms. Williams.
The state recalls Danielle Connor.
Solemnly swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Investigator Connor, the last time that you were on the witness stand, we left off with, I believe, the last of the photos of the interior as well as your collection of the firearm in this case. I want to ask that you be passed 2 documents. Oh, these are just- Do you recognize the documents that were just handed to you?
Yes, I do.
And what are those?
They are diagrams of the exterior and interior scenes of the Waffle House.
Your Honor, at this time I would ask that both diagrams with diagram of the exterior being marked 17A and the diagram of the interior be marked 17B. And if I may have permission to publish them digitally? Sorry. Thank you, Steve. And Officer Connor, this digital rendering is a little bit blurred. The printed version, the words are very clear, but can you just generally describe what is shown in this crime scene diagram?
So the diagram viewed here on the screen is that of the exterior scene. The little yellow numbered placards are the ones we had viewed earlier in the scan, and the pictures representing the evidence that we had collected. One in the circle off to the left is pointing towards where the jacket was found across the street. Up here, we had one of the victims, victim 2, which was Joe Perez, and the little marker, the yellow one, is the hat that we had collected. The pink square over here was where victim Mr. Sanderlin had been located. And then the remaining yellow markers are those of the cartridge casings that we had collected around the vehicle. This here is that vehicle I'm talking about, the pickup truck that had been seen in the photographs.
And the vehicles that are in the parking lot, are they listed with their license plate numbers?
Yes, they are.
And so that's 15 casings that were collected from the exterior of that building, is that correct?
Correct, 15.
And then moving to 17B, can you describe what is shown here?
This will be a diagram of the interior scene. Over here is the entrance door that we had viewed. The second entrance door goes this way into the actual restaurant. And then again, the little yellow squares with the numbers are those evidence markers that we viewed in the Pharaoh and the photos from the interior. We have the weapon behind the counter. And then over here where Mr. Da Silva and I believe Miss Wagner had been located 37, 35 were the shoe and the clothing. This area here is that hallway with the bathrooms where Mr. Shaw had been located. And then 34 here was the magazine. This number here was that little tiny lead fragment. And then all the remaining squares around the booths are where 15 cartridge casings had also been located inside the business.
And those cartridge casings, the location of them, based off of this scene and what you viewed in the video, is it indicative of anything from where the gun is actually being fired?
Generally, where we find the casings and mark them as evidence is close to where they originally were, but not necessarily always exactly where they were. When the casings hit the ground, sometimes they bounce or roll depending on the surface of the ground. They can also, in like the exterior scene, there were a lot of cars coming in and out between people leaving the scene or driving through to originally come to the Waffle House, or medical and police coming, so they can be moved by vehicles. Here in the interior, they could have been kicked in some of the rush of people moving in and out after they had originally come to rest.
And because at the point that you're processing the scene, they've had emergency personnel moving victims in and out and things of that nature. Is that correct?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Can you take that down? Thank you. Investigator Connor, I want to go back to the Pharaoh scan if we can. Thank you. And going back specifically to scan 9, which you have previously described, can you describe what, if anything, happened with the suspect's vehicle, the beige Chevy pickup truck? I know that you, I think previously yesterday, were describing that there was something that had to occur before you could actually enter the scene to process the scene at all.
Right, so when we arrived, initially, other units were also arriving to the scene, one being bomb squad. So part of the concern when we were out there and viewed the video was he arrived in the pickup truck but fled on foot. So why didn't he leave in that truck that he arrived in? So part of the concern for our department was, could it have contained any explosive devices? So bomb squad had to come out before we could process the scene, and they had to clear the vehicle. That's why in the photos and the Pharaoh scans, the doors are open when we started our processing.
And at some point, was that vehicle processed?
It was, yes.
And I am navigating to what is listed as suspect vehicle, and there are a series of photos within the Pharaoh scan, the first one being IMG 0290, which is previously introduced Exhibit 5II. Can you describe what is shown here?
So this is a view of into the driver door here. There appeared to be a blanket or two on the driver's seat, and that is how we viewed it after bomb squad had cleared the vehicle.
The next image is IMG 0308. It is previously introduced Exhibit 5JJ. Could you describe what's shown here?
So this is a closer up photo into the driver's compartment. There was a gray, black, I think it had possibly like a White Sox print on that black side. And then there were items around the center console area. Specifically, there were some checks right here. One containing a local address for the suspect. I don't remember that address, but I do remember that it appeared to be a paycheck to him with an address on it.
And the next image is 0299 in the Pharaoh, which is previously introduced Exhibit 5KK. Can you describe what's shown here?
So this is into the front passenger side of the vehicle. The glove box was opened by bomb squad and we searched that as well. He appeared to have some sort of construction or maintenance type articles and tools in his truck. And then some duct tape down on the lower floorboard and some paperwork.
And this photograph that you took actually kind of gives a vantage point of someone standing on the passenger side of that pickup truck and kind of how much of the interior of the Waffle House that they would be able to see. Is that correct?
Yes.
And the next image, which is IMG 0301 and previously introduced Exhibit 5LL, can you describe what's shown here?
Yeah, this is the front passenger floorboard and the articles on that, including some paperwork and a receipt.
And the next image is IMG 0300 and previously introduced Exhibit 5MM. Could you describe what's shown here?
This photograph is showing into the glove box. It contained obviously some gum and paperwork. I believe, a little glare here, but I believe that's a knife that was in there. And then on the floor, you had the roll of duct tape, and this was an iPod that had been collected.
And the next image in the Pharaoh is labeled 0302. It is previously introduced Exhibit 5NN. Could you please describe what is shown here?
This is showing through the vehicle from the passenger side to the driver's side. Again, we can see a little closer those checks on that center console that I had previously mentioned.
And the last image, which is in the Pharaoh 0034 and previously introduced Exhibit 500. Could you describe what is shown here?
Those are those checks off that center console. Again, this is what we had seen as a possible local address for the individual.
Which, Judge, if I can have a moment, I would like to return Exhibit 4 and Exhibit 5 to the clerk. Investigator Connor, you've previously testified that you viewed the surveillance video prior to processing that scene.
That's correct. It was the first thing I did when I arrived.
And Your Honor, at this time I would ask permission to publish what has already been introduced as Exhibit 3, video file number 5. Investigator Connor, I don't have any other questions.
Good morning, Investigator Connor. Just very quickly, you talked about processing the truck itself. You recall being shown, I believe it was photographic exhibits 5KK and 5NN, which were the interior of the truck
Okay,
from the vantage point of the passenger side.
okay.
When you process the truck, the keys to the truck were actually in the ignition, is that correct?
I don't recall.
Okay, all right, thank you. If the clerk could provide me with exhibit 5KK and 5NN, please. Thank you, and I'll need to use the document projector.
Yes, it appears they were still in the ignition.
Thank you very much.
Mhm.
I can produce these photographs back to the board. Those are all the questions I have. Thank you.
Here we go.
Thank you, Investigator. Next witness.
Thank you.
All right, next witness.
Officer Gann.
So if you would raise your hand, be sworn, please.
Solemnly swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Sir, could you please tell us your name and spell your first and last name for us?
Officer Gary Gann, Gerrygann.
And by being officer, by whom are you employed?
By the Metropolitan Nashville Police Department,
How long have you been with Metro?
15 years.
Back in April of 2018, what were your duties with the Metropolitan Police Department?
I was one of the bomb technicians on the full-time bomb squad and also an explosive detection canine handler.
K-9 handler, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, so the K-9 would be your partner, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, could you tell us a little bit about what that unit does? And is it officially referred to as the Hazardous Device Unit?
Yes, sir. It is the official name of the Hazardous Device Unit, but it consists of 6 full-time bomb technicians, and our job is to respond and mitigate any type of explosive devices that are found, investigate any type of suspicious devices or suspicious packages, recover and dispose of any military ordnance, and we also conduct pre-event sweeps for major events, Titans games, presidential visits, hockey games, and so on.
So if somebody leaves a backpack outside the post office on the sidewalk,
Yes,
You're
sir.
called in.
We're called in and we utilize our tools to mitigate it and make it safe.
or if somebody finds a hand grenade
Yes, sir.
in a parking lot,
Yes, sir.
that sort of thing. So as of April 2018, how long had you been with the hazardous device unit, or what we would call the bomb squad?
I've been with them for a little over 7 years.
And maybe go into great detail, but what sort of training or experience does it take to be a member of that unit?
So you have to go through a minimum 6-week course at Redstone Arsenal, which is the Hazardous Devices School, which trains you as a bomb technician. And you have to do also continuous training every year, not only unit training, which consists of 3 days a month of unit training, but you have to do outside training as well to keep your certifications. And every 3 years, we were required to go back down to Redstone and do a 1-week recertification course. And there's multiple advanced training courses that we also have to complete to maintain our certifications.
Okay, and what about your partner?
Our partners have got to go through the USPCA certification process to be certified as an explosive detection canine. And that consists of the initial training where they are trained up on the detection of explosive odors. And then we also do maintenance training typically once a week throughout the year to conduct our maintenance training. We're required to recertify once a year.
All right, and what was your partner's name?
His name was Sapper.
I believe you said that a good portion of your job is prevention
Yes, sir.
and surveillance, security, preventive measures, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you always expect that you're gonna find some bomb or some ordnance when you go to a scene.
We treat everything as it's dangerous until we're able to mitigate it down to where it's no longer dangerous.
Okay, and in connection with this particular case, back in April of 2018, were you called to do your job along with your partner at a Waffle House on Murfreesboro Road near Pinhook Lane?
Yes, sir, I was.
And you recall approximately what time you were advised that you were needed there?
It was very early in the morning. I don't remember the exact time in which I was called, but it was very early in the morning. I was one of the on-call bomb technicians that morning.
Right.
So I was not on duty at the time. I was on call.
Right. Did you go to the scene?
Yes, sir, I did.
And did you have your partner with you?
Yes, sir.
When you arrived, was there a particular object, vehicle, area that you were instructed to or asked to review?
Yes, sir. I was advised of what had occurred at the scene and asked to conduct a sweep of a gold Chevy Silverado pickup truck sitting in the parking lot of the Waffle House.
Okay. Drew's just seen that a few minutes ago, so I'm not going to put it up again.
Yes, sir.
But what do you recall about the truck when you first saw it?
I was sitting in the parking lot. It was close to the main entrance door, and I recalled that it, and also was informed that it had an Illinois tag on it just to differentiate it from any other vehicle inside the parking lot.
Okay. And walk us through, when you arrived there, did it appear as anyone had gone through the vehicle or been in it?
It did not appear that the vehicle had been gone through. Both the doors were shut, my recollection, and it did not appear that anybody had already been through the vehicle.
Okay. And with respect to that, were you able to tell whether or not anyone was inside the vehicle at that time?
I was informed that nobody was inside of the vehicle at the time.
Okay. You say you treat every situation as if it could be a live, dangerous situation. Is that
Yes,
correct? And so did you do that in this case?
Yes, sir, I did.
Okay, could you explain to the jury what you did? You and your partner, how did you determine whether or not this vehicle had any explosive device or?
Yes, sir. I donned protective equipment, which would have been our large heavy vest and helmet, and deployed my partner, in which we conducted a sweep around the vehicle. Utilizing my partner, we swept around the vehicle, and around the front fender and door area, my partner gave me an alert to the presence of an explosive odor in that area.
Okay. Now, there having been shots fired, jury has seen, from that general area, would gunpowder or the residue from firing weapons cause your partner to alert?
Yes, sir, it would.
Okay. Based upon that alert, what did you do?
Based upon that alert, I put my partner back inside the truck and I conducted a search of the vehicle, searching only for explosives and improvised explosive devices to be able to clear that vehicle of any of those hazards.
Okay, just to be clear, since that's a truck and said you put your partner back in a truck, was it a different truck?
Yes, I put him back inside of my response vehicle, which was parked in a safe area away from the scene.
Okay, once that was taken care of, what did you do with respect to looking in the Illinois tag plate truck?
I opened up cleared the driver's door area from any booby traps that may have been set up and opened up the driver's door, began to clear the vehicle of any explosive devices. So looked inside the main cab portion of the vehicle, cleared out the main cab portion of the vehicle, and also cleared the bed area of the truck.
Okay, did you find anything?
No explosive devices or explosives were found inside the vehicle.
Okay, and upon that, was it then all right for the other officers, ID people to come and do their job with it?
Yes, sir, it was.
Now, while looking around for the explosive devices, did you see anything that you pointed out or took note of?
Yes, sir, I did. In the center console area of the vehicle, I noticed that there were 2 paycheck stubs with the payee being addressed to a Travis Reinking and the address on that being 5000 Mountain Spring Road, apartment 409, which I felt was important. I used to work South Precinct prior to going over to the bomb squad, and I knew the close proximity of those apartments to where our current location was.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I was gonna ask you that very thing. Were you familiar with that area?
Yes, sir, I was.
And with respect to the Waffle House, where were the apartments?
They're very close, basically the next road south of the Waffle House is, if you take a right on the next road south of the Waffle House, that is where the apartments were. It's well within a mile radius of the location.
The distance as far as mileage, 1 mile, 10 mile approximately?
It's under a mile radius.
And Your Honor, if we could put up, we have a map of the area, I believe it's exhibit number 2. Maybe a bit of a glare, but you recognize this general area?
Yes, sir.
All right. And there's been some previous markings on it, but with respect to the circle on the top, would you recognize what that?
The circle on the top would be the location of the Waffle House.
All right. And would be heading south. The arrow is directed south. Is that
Yes.
correct? And the second arrow, the second circle, the lower circle.
That would be the entrance to the apartment complex at 5000 Mountain Springs.
And if you could, by touching the screen, just circle where the apartment complex itself is. Now, had you been up into that apartment complex prior to the date of this incident?
No, I don't believe I was ever called to that working before.
On the date in question, did you end up going to that apartment complex?
Yes, sir, I did.
Thank you. I think that's all I need for that. Now, you told us about the address. You were familiar with it. Have the apartment number street address. Why did you go there?
We were asked to assist our SWAT team later that morning with assisting in the search warrant. On the bomb squad, we have robotic capabilities that allow us to utilize, there are robots that we can utilize remotely to enter and search a location.
And is that a part of the equipment that you use to detect bombs or to
Yes, sir.
do surveillance without a human being
Yes, sir.
being
That's correct.
endangered?
Yes, sir.
So tell us about that. You go to the apartment, you recall whether it's on first floor, second floor, third floor?
It was, the entrance to it was on the ground floor, and we were assisting our SWAT team with doing the robotic entry and surveillance inside the apartment prior to sending a actual person inside. As soon as you entered through the door of the apartment, it immediately was a set of stairs that you went up to a top landing, which was the open area of the apartment. We utilized our robotic platforms to make entry and go up those stairs and clear with our camera systems to ensure that there were no people inside the apartment prior to actually sending our SWAT team members in.
Okay, so I take it by your response, the robot has cameras and you're able to, and can you direct it?
Yes, sir.
Up and down stairs?
Yes, sir. We can drive it up and down stairs. We can utilize the camera systems on the robot to give a 360 view of where the robot is at to be able to see if there are any persons or threats inside the apartment.
Okay, and did you do that in this
Yes, sir.
instance? And was there anyone at the apartment?
Nobody was inside the apartment.
And you recall approximately what time of the day it was when you made this entry, robotic entry?
It was later that morning. I don't recall the exact time of day that we did it, but it was later that morning.
Did you yourself, after being assured that the robot had not detected anyone, did you go in yourself and look around?
I did not go inside the apartment myself.
Okay. Those are my questions, John.
Wrong.
Thank you. Good morning, Officer Gann.
Morning.
So you were talking a little bit about the distance from the Waffle House to Mr. Reinking's apartment. It's fair to say from door to door, it's approximately 1 mile.
I don't know the exact distance. I know if you were doing a straight line distance, it's, I believe it to be under a mile, but I don't know the exact distance.
Okay. You talked about searching the truck. And just to be clear, no, other than the dog hitting on the fact that there had been shots fired close to that truck, there was no incendiary devices found in the truck. Is that correct?
No, sir, there was not.
Likewise with the apartment. Is that correct?
I never made entry into the apartment, but I did not visually see any explosive or incendiary devices inside the apartment.
And do you recall when you approached the truck whether the driver's side window was up or down?
I do not remember that, sir.
Thank you.
Read right.
No, you're right. Sergeant Holt.
Raise your hand if you want, please.
You solemnly swear to affirm and tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, sir.
Sir, could you please tell us your name and spell your first and last name for us?
It's Sergeant Daniel Polk, Daniel, Polk, Polk.
You employed?
I'm sorry,
By whom are you employed?
Metro Nashville Police Department,
And how long have you been with the Metropolitan Nashville Police Department?
13 years.
What are your present duties or assignments with the police department?
My current duty is a North A detail patrol sergeant.
And in April of 2018, particularly the April 23rd of 2018, what were your duties with the police department?
I was a Hermitage Midnight Patrol Sergeant.
And what does a Hermitage Midnight Patrol Sergeant do for the police department?
I supervise patrol officers that are working the midnight shift.
The Hermitage Precinct, what general part of town does that cover?
Murfreesboro Road is the border between Hermitage Precinct and South Precinct. It takes in the Percy Priest Lake, Donaldson, Hermitage, Opry Mills area, and up to Lafayette, University Court, J.C. Napier.
On the early morning hours of April 23rd, 2018, did you become involved in the investigation of an incident that occurred at the Waffle House in Murfreesboro Road near Pinhook Drive?
Yes, we got an all-there's dispatch for shooting at the Waffle House with multiple victims. So I, along with other Hermitage officers, responded down, because it was on Murfreesboro Road, responded down Murfreesboro Road to the scene.
Do you recall where you were when you received the call?
Officer Gilpin from K-9 and myself and a couple other cars were in the Lafayette Fairfield area when the call was dispatched.
Now, I believe you said it was an all airs call.
Yes.
What does that mean?
On certain calls, they take all airs, so everybody in the city hears it. Anybody with a radio on hears the call.
Now, does that include other agencies? Or does it depend on whether they're listening?
They would have to be listening to our frequency. It would be, for example, on Sunday nights at that time, they patched two precincts together at the same time, and one dispatcher dispatched two precincts. And at that time, South and Hermitage were patched on Sunday night. So we heard everything that South had. South had everything that we had. They heard everything we had. But when they take all airs, every police car in the city hears it. Anybody that has a Metro Police radio will hear it.
And what was the nature of the all airs alert or call?
It went out as a 52, which is a shooting with multiple victims.
Did you respond immediately?
Yes,
Yeah, with lights and sirens?
yes.
When you arrived, what was the situation? What did you see?
I arrived right after Officer Gilpin from K-9. Officer Johns was already on the scene. He had advised us before we got there that there were multiple victims and that we had multiple fatalities. So as I pull up, Officer Johns is inside the Waffle House. As I'm coming down Murfreesboro Road to get to the scene, the fire department is staged, waiting on us to get there to clear the scene before they go in. So we passed multiple ambulances and fire trucks as we go down Murfreesboro Road. So they fell in right behind us. So as we pull up, all of the medical professionals are pulling in right behind us. Like I said, Officer Johns is inside administering first aid. There was a South officer, I want to say his last name's Smith, that was on the scene. Gilpin and myself. I got out of my car. I could see the two male victims lying outside the Waffle House, and I could see two females underneath the table inside. The first person I made contact with was Mr. Shaw, standing in the parking lot. I asked him if he was okay. He explained to me that he's the one that took the rifle away from him. Asked again if he was okay. He showed me a wound on his arm, and it wasn't life-threatening, so I went up to the Waffle House. I don't think I ever actually went in the building at that point because all the medics were pouring in at that point, and I wanted to stay out of their way.
and I want to ask you about that. You said the medical personnel have to wait until it's cleared for them to come in.
Yes.
So was that something that was done quickly?
Once I was on the scene with Gilpin and Officer Johns, the witnesses told us that Mr. Reinking, or the suspect, had left on foot. That was also in the call text on the way down, that he had left on foot. Once we did a really, really quick, just sweep it with our eyes, they went in.
Okay. So there was no delay, no waiting around?
Only for enough of us to get there to get it clear before they came in.
And did the medical personnel go in and
Immediately.
said that you did not go inside the Waffle House at that time? What did you do?
I don't think I actually went in the building at that point because the medical personnel was in there. I realized at that point that we had a very chaotic scene. It was I mean, we see a lot of bad crime scenes, but that one, it looked like a war zone. It really did. There were people lying everywhere, people screaming, running around the parking lot. So I decided to back off, get back up on the sidewalk and take a bigger view of what was going on and start trying to coordinate, making sure we had ingress and egress for ambulances and had a secure perimeter around the Waffle House.
At that time, were you the senior officer in command?
I was the first supervisor on the scene, yes.
And so did you start making decisions, giving orders, and
Yes. Yeah, I established the incident command at that point.
were other people arriving, other officers arriving,
Yes.
all right, and other supervisors?
Yes.
Now, was it part of your responsibility to call in those individuals? And if so, who did you call?
As far as,
As far as saying, well, we need a lieutenant, we need a captain, how did that work?
well, we had a field captain on duty that night, and he responded to the scene. He was there pretty quickly after I got there, or after I had established command. As far as immediately calling in other elements, we had K-9 on the scene. Officer Gilpin was right there. I knew I had cars coming from all over the city. So my biggest concern was getting a big perimeter set up around the area. When I was a patrol officer, that was my patrol zone, so I knew it really well. I was trying to coordinate officers as they come in as to where to set up to get a containment perimeter so K-9 could attempt to track. And it was at that point that I called for aviation.
Sort of walk through that as the people were, agencies becoming involved.
Well,
Would it be fair to say your first priority was tending to the wounded?
Absolutely, making sure that the ambulances and paramedics could get in and out.
And then finding the perpetrator?
Setting up a perimeter. Well, I had a couple officers walk around the Waffle House to look for any suspicious packages in case maybe he had planted an IED for our response. And then at that point, secure the perimeter around the Waffle House with the officers I had on the scene. And at that point, I stopped other officers from coming to the scene and had them scatter in the area to set up a perimeter to contain him for K-9 and potentially aviation once they got there.
And it was your understanding that the perpetrator had left on foot?
Yes.
All right. And what sort of perimeter did you initially ask to be set up?
Well, initially it was the immediate area around the Waffle House. And then we steadily moved it out. Like I said, I knew that area. So the geography of that area. So I started having cars go back into the Summercrest subdivision. I actually had cars in 5,000 Mountain Springs. As they arrived, I had cars over at the Cambridge High School area off of Hobson Pike. And further down, we were told that he had left going southeast on Murfreesboro Road back towards 5,000 Mountain Springs. So we concentrated our perimeter in that area, back towards the Cambridge High School area.
And what sort, time-wise, time frame, is this being done?
Well, the inner perimeter and getting ingress and egress from the ambulances is immediate. I mean, the first officers on the scene, that's what I was having them do, was secure that area around the Waffle House. I had an officer assigned to collect or keep the victims and witnesses in an area where we could make sure that they were talked to by investigators when they got there. But as cars were checking in from across the city, that I was directing them toward the areas that I wanted them to go.
Now, had it gotten to be daylight by then?
No.
Okay. So this is still pre-dawn
Yes.
hours?
Yes.
Did any of the cars, Metro police officers radio that they had a suspect in custody?
No.
As daylight approached, were other officers called in?
Yes. The SID, Special Investigative Division, they were called in, and they all drive unmarked cars. So we were using them on the perimeter as well because they're in unmarked cars, hoping that Mr. Reinking might pop out of the wood line somewhere between a house. That the entire SID division was called in. My understanding, the entire SID divisions, excuse me, was called in.
And if you know approximately how many people is that?
60, maybe.
And he asked for the number of patrol officers.
Yeah, throughout the course of the morning, I was getting updates from dispatch on the cars that I had on command. Just for my purposes of knowing what I had out there. And of course, it steadily grew throughout the day. But dispatch can only see the cars that have computers in them. So all of the SID cars, they can't see them. We knew they were there, but dispatch, when I was getting updates on the number of officers on the scene, the dispatch could only tell me what they could see on their computer screen.
Which would be the patrol officers?
Yes.
And approximately how many of those?
It grew throughout the day. My recollection, it went from 16, very early to 30 to over 70, 68 to 70.
You mentioned a few minutes ago calling in aviation.
Yes.
What is that? What is with the police department?
At that particular time, on midnights, aviation was in an on-call status. So I had to get dispatch to page out a supervisor from aviation, who then called me to find out why we needed them. And then he got his pilot to the hangar and the helicopter in here.
And you know approximately what time that was, when that was?
It was daylight before he got there because he lives out of county. Or that particular pilot at that time lived out of county.
Okay. So by daylight or shortly after daylight, there was a helicopter in the air.
Our helicopter and Tennessee Highway Patrol's helicopter.
I was going to ask you about that, about other agencies.
Yes.
So Metro's helicopter is called out, is in the air.
Yes.
And minutes ago, you said that you were very familiar with that area, having worked it. And
Yes.
you mentioned woods.
Yes.
Could you describe that area to the jury?
Well, behind the Waffle House, there's a big subdivision of homes. I couldn't tell you how many homes. There's a lot of them in that subdivision. But back to the southeast, it's kind of a hilly terrain up behind 5,000 Mountain Springs and over back into the Cane Ridge area. And it's a pretty heavily wooded area back in there. It's been a long time since I've been back in that area, behind 5,000 Mountain Springs. But my recollection is it's really hilly and really wooded back in there.
And are there schools in the area? And
Yes, Cane Ridge High School is, as a crow flies, just over the hill from 5,000 Mountain Springs. And it literally, as a crow flies, from the Waffle House. The high school's back there.
now, getting on to the other agencies, did there come a time when other agencies were called in to assist or volunteered to assist?
They were, yeah, I don't know that they were called, outside of when we requested the bomb squad. Once we established that the pickup truck was Mr. Rankins and it was parked in the front door he clearly left on foot and left the truck there, so there was some concern about the safety of the truck. So the bomb squad was called in to clear the truck, so we did call them. I had, members of the ATF that showed up,
And what is the ATF?
Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco and Firearms.
Is that a federal agency?
Yes, sir, federal agency. Had, the FBI showed up. Secret Service was there. I'm trying to make sure I get everybody. We had a few officers, as I remember, I was on the phone with Laverne PD. We had officers from Laverne that were kind of extending our perimeter out to their city limits that were assisting us. Again, I had the Highway Patrol's helicopter. There were 5 or 6 state troopers that showed up, a lieutenant, a sergeant, and I think 3 troopers that showed up to assist us.
And so was Mr. Reinking immediately taken into custody then, given all this?
No. I was the incident commander from shortly after arriving on the scene until 3:30 that Sunday afternoon. And when I left, when I was relieved by Lieutenant John Batty at that point, he was still outstanding. Oh, we also had SWAT and SRT was there as well.
Okay. What are that, just for the purpose of the record?
Special weapons and tactics and the special response team. They were on the scene. They served a search warrant at Mr. Rankin's apartment. Once we established where we thought he lived, or once we established his residence, SWAT served that search warrant.
Okay.
And they assisted with some of our ghost calls that we were getting of people calling in from all over that area with sightings of him.
I was gonna ask about that.
Okay.
Had the public been advised to be on the lookout?
We didn't make that call. I didn't make that call. I know that when Captain Newbern got there, I was standing on the sidewalk and outside, right off of Murfreesboro Road, trying to think of all the things that I hadn't thought about yet. And he looked at me and says, just so you know, when he holds up his phone, and it was the ABC World News. And the announcement was on there. At that point, we did not have an identification of the suspect.
Had the search or the bomb squad looking into the vehicle assisted in having, you mentioned an apartment that was searched. Did you have essentially Mr. Reinking's apartment?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Did you have his address?
Yes, at some point early in the morning, we had an identification on him and an address.
All right.
I say early in the morning, mid-morning, if I recall.
And with respect to the search, how wide an area did it finally cover?
When I left that Sunday afternoon, our SWAT commander was in the process of setting up a grid search. We had already started a house-by-house search in Summercrest, the subdivision. A sergeant, he's now a captain, at the time Sergeant Dayton Wheeler was heading up the house-to-house search in Summercrest, which is a very large subdivision. Sergeant at the time, now Lieutenant Tedderton, was heading up the 5,000 Mountain Spring door-to-door knock and talks to make sure that Mr. Rankin hadn't found his way into someone's home. I would say 1 square mile, if I had to guess. And that takes into consideration the ghost calls we were getting from that area.
I want to ask you, what does that mean?
Sightings that when we get there, they're found to, I'm saying ghost calls, it's not really a technical term that we use, but we're getting there and it's not really a sighting. When we get there and conduct an investigation, it's not what we were led to believe.
Somebody thinks they saw something in calls and.
Yeah, I know, our public information officer, Don Aaron, was getting updates really, really quickly when he got there. I don't know at what point he put out the description, but we started getting calls about it pretty quickly.
Okay. And did you, not you individually, but did the police have to respond to every possible sighting?
Yeah, we eventually set up, I had two groups of officers. I think there were 3 or 4 man groups that were responsible for responding to those particular calls. Because early on, when we were getting them, it was the closest officer in the area was like kind of breaking the perimeter to go check that call. And we didn't want that to happen. We wanted to maintain that perimeter. So we set up a group, 2 groups, that all they did was respond to those calls with possible sightings.
And did that take away from the other 100, 200 officers that were actively searching?
Well, absolutely. I mean, we could have used every officer we've had on the perimeter. I mean, we had K-9 out there tracking. I know the bomb squad was clearing different things that were being found around the area. We could have used everybody we had, but we had to respond to those calls.
And you mentioned Don Aaron putting out information to the media. Did there come a time where the media advised or had a picture of Mr. Reinking?
Yes. I don't remember at what point that was, but I do remember that once we had an ID on him, that it was all provided.
And you said officers were going door to door in the apartments, the homes around there. Were any other protective measures taken with respect to the churches, schools?
Yes, early in the morning, because that, if my recollection serves me, that was 1 year to the date from the Antioch church shooting. So Chief Anderson at the time, ordered that we have a marked police car at every church within the footprint of our perimeter. And if I remember correctly, it was 7 churches, which we had to pull resources. We didn't take resources that we already had. We had to pull resources from other precincts to come out, because he wanted a marked car with blue lights on in the parking lot. We had to pull resources from other precincts within the city to man those 7 churches.
And by the time you were relieved, how long a day had that been for you?
Well, I started at 10:15 that night, and it was 3:30, 3:40 the following afternoon.
And at that time, had Mr. Reinking been apprehended?
No.
Those are my questions, John.
No question.
All right, sir, please step down. Here in the jury, we're going to take our visual inquiry about this time. Please keep in mind, you may not discuss anything about this wrong case. You must keep the cause to yourself, remain open minded. Go back to the line for a few minutes. Use any accommodation you need, get settled for just a few minutes, we'll get back in. All right, we can go get the chair called.
If you've had occasion to go to a movie, you know that there's something called the previews of coming attractions.
If you've had an occasion to go to a movie, you know you see what's called previews of the coming attractions.
And that's what this is supposed to be. It's supposed to be a guide, our roadmap, if you will, what we expect the evidence to show.
This is supposed to be a guide, or a roadmap, if you will, as to what we believe the evidence will show.
As an officer of this court, and in the course of my remarks this morning, and maybe this afternoon, I would expect to tell you as honestly and as forthrightly as I can what I expect the evidence to be.
As an officer of this court, in the course of my remarks this afternoon, I would expect to tell you as honestly and as forthrightly what we believe the evidence to show.
As the court has so appropriately indicated, what I say is not evidence. It's just to aid you and guide you.
As the court has so appropriately indicated, what I say is not evidence. It is just used to aid and guide you.
You hear a lot about this talk about justice. I guess Dr. Martin Luther King said it best when he said that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And so we are now embarked upon this search for justice.
Just 2 days ago, we celebrated Dr. Martin Luther King. And I don't think anybody has said it is better than him as we talk about justice. And he said that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So we are now embarked upon this search for justice.
This search for truth.
This search for the truth.
This search for the facts.
This search for the facts.
Each of you made a number of promises in the course of the voir dire examination.
Each of you made a number of promises during the voir dire process.
Abraham Lincoln said it best when he said that the highest act of citizenship is jury service. And you're embarked upon that jury service.
Abraham Lincoln said, the highest act of citizenship is jury service. And you're embarked on that jury service today.
But it doesn't stop with just coming down and taking notes.
And it doesn't just stop with you coming down today, taking a few notes.
When it stops is when you, if you can, render a verdict in this case.
It only stops if you can and will reach a verdict in this case.
A verdict rendered devoid of sympathy for or passion against Mr. Simpson or any side in this case.
A verdict that is based off the evidence and devoid of any type of likeness or bias or anything that you might have for the defendant.
You made these promises, and both sides are mindful of those promises. And we know that you're going to keep those promises.
Now, you made these promises, and we are mindful of those promises, and we expect that you're going to keep them.
And of course, we know that you will live up to your promises. And be fair, and keep an open mind, and decide this case not on speculation, not on conjecture, not on surmise, but based upon the facts.
Now, we know that you're going to keep these promises and be fair, and keep an open mind, and decide this case, not on speculation, not on conjecture, not on surmise, but based upon the facts.
You then, as jurors, are the conscience of this community.
You then, jurors, are the consciousness of this community.
Your verdicts set the standards.
Your verdicts set the standards.
You have this rare opportunity, it seems to me, to be participants in this search for justice and for truth.
You have this rare opportunity, as it seems, to be participants in this search for justice and for the truth.
You'll be able to render perhaps the most important decision of your lives.
You will likely reach one of the most important decisions of your life.
So that people all across
anything that Mr. Reinking does that shows compliance, that shows calmness, that shows following orders, goes to his state of mind. But these are the officers that observed him as closest in time to the actual shooting. So all of it's relevant. But there's nothing about it that would be prejudicial because they're going to be testifying to it, but the video allows them to see Mr. Reinking and see how he's acting in that moment.
Your Honor, I think we may be talking about different things. I'm not objecting to the testimony of the officers. Obviously, they're going to be able to testify to their perception of Mr. Reinking's actions at the time when he handcuffed him, we took him into custody. It is the image specifically. But their testimony, and they're going to have, as she said, several officers testifying, the image has very little probative value at that point, regardless of our defense. And it's unduly prejudicial. It's substantially outweighed by the image of him in handcuffs.
I'm going to overrule the objection. I find that the visualization of Mr. Reinking at the time closest to the actual shootings, I realize it's still some 30 hours later. That visualization speaks for itself, and certainly is circumstantial evidence that the jury should be allowed to weigh as to what they perceive his mental condition to be. I don't know all the specifics of what's on the video, but the only thing that could all be considered prejudicial would be the handcuffing. Quite frankly, you know, opposed him testified to the fact that he was handcuffed, and as I've already said, I can't imagine any citizen of any county in any state in this nation that would not expect that the suspect, when taken into custody, is not handcuffed. I just don't see how it's even prejudicial. Certainly his way he acted, his demeanor, and things of this nature is highly probative from a circumstantial evidence standpoint as to his mental state. So I'll overrule the objection.
You ready now, Judge?
Ready to bring him in.
Sergeant Ritter. Sir, could you please tell us your name and spell both your first and last name for us?
Yes, Ben Briner, first name B-E-N, last name Briner, B-R-Y-N-E-R.
By whom are you employed?
Metro Nashville Police Department.
And for how long?
Just over 14 years.
What is your current assignment with the Metropolitan Nashville Police Department?
The current assignment, I work in Specialized Investigation Division in a Neighborhood Safety Unit.
What does that unit do? What are your responsibilities?
It has changed since this incident. My unit now, essentially we work overdose deaths, and we try to find the people responsible for providing the victim with the narcotics that would have led to their death.
And in April of 2018, what were your duties?
It was the same unit, but back then we were the narcotics unit, and that we tried to investigate larger scale narcotics investigations, like drugs coming over the border, coming into Tennessee.
Back in 2018, were you called to become involved in a essentially non-narcotic related incident?
I was, yes. So on that morning, my lieutenant had called us. Since we're essentially non-essential, we don't have patrol duties. Any kind of special situations come arise, they can call us. We're an unmarked cars, plainclothes unit. And so my lieutenant called me that morning and said, told us about the incident that happened and wanted us all, the whole team, to come in to track down the person they thought responsible.
When you say that morning, would that have been the Sunday morning, April 22nd?
Correct. Yes, that Sunday morning.
And approximately what time were you called?
It was in the morning, 7, 8-ish in the morning. I don't know exact time, but it was.
Daylight?
Yeah, the sun was up when I got the call. Yes.
And where did you respond?
We responded, I believe it was to the Publix, out on Murfreesboro Road, out right, generally across the street from Waffle House where the incident occurred.
And you said your unit, how many people, officers were in your unit at the time?
At that time, I believe we had 9 detectives.
And did everyone respond?
From what I remember, I know one was out of town, but she did respond late in the afternoon, and everybody else who was on the team, I believe, did respond. There could have been one or two that didn't, but it seemed like the majority of them were there.
I don't necessarily need you to tell what all you were told, but were you advised about what had occurred, the situation, and what you were going to be needed to do?
Yes, sir.
All right. And you said there was a staging area at the Publix.
Yes, sir.
Was that just for your unit, or were there more officers there?
No, there was a lot. I've been in Metro 14 years, 7 years law enforcement before that. In my 21 years, I've never seen as many officers out.
And was it a command structure, that there was someone in charge, someone giving orders and directing different officers to do different things?
Yes, sir.
All right. And in that chain of command, what were you and your unit requested to do?
So on that day, my lieutenant informed us that we were to drive the area, since we were in unmarked cars, drive the area, and they would dispatch us from the command post, any possible sightings, which could consist of anything. A lot of people may have a shed that they'd noticed a door looked like it was ajar. And so they'd say, hey, go to this address, and we'd go to that address and then search your shed. Or it could be go door to door, knock on doors and talk to them, see if they've seen anything. There's fields, woods, everything. We went, pretty much you name it. Any call that came in, we would go try to address it.
All right. And we're still talking about Sunday.
Yes, sir.
All right. During that Sunday, what sort of area were you sent? Did you have any idea?
It was a large area, pretty much anything in what we consider South Precinct and Herbert's Precinct area. Both sides of Murfreesboro Road, all in the area for several mile radius.
Were you familiar with that area prior to this day?
I have worked a little bit in that area, but no, not real familiar.
All right. So, be fair to say, you went where you were told to go.
Yes, sir.
And that was on Sunday.
Yes, sir.
Was anyone apprehended on Sunday?
No, sir.
Okay. Did you stay on duty the entire day and through the night, Sunday night?
We were there until Sunday night. It was dark when we went home. I don't know the time. It was 9, 10 o'clock, I think, before we left.
And when you left, your unit left, were there still officers there, or
Yes.
did everybody just turn in for the night?
No, there were still officers there patrolling, but as far as our unit goes, we were sent home, I think, around probably 10-ish, and then told to come back the next morning.
Okay. And did you come back the next morning, Monday, April 23rd?
Yes, sir, we did.
And on Monday, April the 23rd, what did you do?
A lot of the same. We were to drive around in our cars. We wore raid gear, but we're in unmarked cars, and we were to drive around and the same thing, answer call, any sightings, respond to those sightings, and either confirm or dispel them.
When you say raid gear, what does that mean?
We would have a vest on. We'd have a raid jacket, like a jacket that had Metro patches. So we had it was the Metro Police and have a badge. The patch on the back said Metro Police, and also have a Metro Police emblem on it. So we'd be identified once we're out of the vehicles as police officers.
Okay. Now, did there come a time when you got out of your police vehicle and searched on foot?
Numerous times.
All right. And what sort of areas were you searching on foot?
A lot of it were wooded areas, fields, neighborhoods. We pretty much all in that area, we went everywhere and searched.
Let me just ask about this. When you're out, are you by yourself, other officers? How does that work?
No, I had Detective Jimmy Gregg was with me. We were two-man cars, or we were at least, and most everybody I think was paired up with somebody so I could be with somebody, because we wouldn't go search by, anywhere by yourself.
Okay. And when you're out in the woods, was there anything done to be able to tell that person that some sound you might hear could be another officer?
I mean, there's lots of times that you could hear things in the woods, you go and you would find other officers that were in there. That happened, yes.
Okay. And during the time that you were in the woods, either Sunday or Monday, did you become the first person to contact Travis Reinking?
It wasn't the first, but I can explain how that happened.
And that's what I was going to get to. On Monday afternoon, were you and Detective Gregg paired up?
Yes, sir.
Again. And where were you, let's say, shortly after noon on that Monday?
So on that day, we were in the area of Murfreesboro Road in 5,000 Mountain Springs. We're a little ways off. And then at that point, Lieutenant Laura came over our dispatch radio and said that there had been a possible sighting of Mr. Reinking over at, walking away from 5,000 Mountain Springs off into a wooded area by the T-gate lines.
Now, you mentioned earlier that your duties were to go respond to possible sightings. So was this just another one so far as you knew at that time?
As far as we knew at that time, yes, because we had gone to so many. That's what, when we went to it, that's what we appeared to be at first.
Okay. But I tell you, Hardy, you couldn't just disregard a sighting.
Correct. No, we checked them all out.
Okay. And so when this one comes in, it's from your lieutenant. Do you recall where you were? Were you in the woods at the time?
No, at the time we got, we were in the car. We were on the perimeter of some other woods, kind of sitting in our vehicle, looking at, I can't remember the road, but we were able to look at the roads by this woods. We were looking up and down both sides of the road just in case somebody were in the woods would come out. But it was a mile or two away from 5,000 Mountain Springs.
Okay. So at this time, Lieutenant comes on with what could be just another possible sighting that
Yes,
you have to check out.
Yes, sir.
And is that essentially all that you knew at that time?
That's all at that time, yes.
So what did you do? Where did you go?
So Detective Greg and myself went to 5,000 Mountain Springs, which is an apartment complex right off of Murfreesboro Road. It's kind of gradually goes up a hill. We drove all the way to the very far top, back left of the apartment complex. We got out of the vehicle. As soon as we got out of the vehicle, I looked over. I could see 3 or 4 workers. I believe they're TVA workers. And they were kind of frantically waving and trying to get our attention. And they were telling us what direction, like, hey, the subject went in there, because they're pretty adamant it was him. And they said he's wearing a maroon shirt, blue jeans, and a backpack, black backpack. And so as I walked over to the wood line, I said, well, I'm gonna walk the wood line wherever the person that you saw went in, let me know, and then we'll go in there. And so I was walking over, me and Detective Gray walked to the wood line. As we was walking down the wood line, we got to a certain point, and they're all like right there. And so I turned and looked, and I could see a small trail. So at that point, I radioed other people on my team, and I let them know. I said, hey, I don't know if it's him, but somebody's definitely in here. I said, they're all very adamant. They just saw him, and they said they went in here, and there's actually a trail where they're pointing me to go. So at that point, me and Detective Gray, we started walking down the trail. And as we were walking, like I said, I radioed for the other team members to come up and help me search the woods. It came to a little fork in the road. There's one trail went to the left, one went to the right. The one that went to the right was more of you could kind of see it was a little more clear, and went straight ahead. So since we were the first ones in, me and Detective Gray went down that trail. And shortly after going down that trail, over the radio, I could hear, I know Detective Kyle Williams was on my team. I've worked a long time, so I hear him on the radio say, I've got contact. And he asked for backup in a hurry.
Okay, before we get to that part of it, to give the jury perhaps a visual of what this area looked like, if I could ask these 3 photographs pre-labeled A, B, and C be passed to the sergeant. Sergeant, do you recognize anyone or any?
Yes, that would be myself.
All right. And do those photographs fairly and accurately depict the area that you were searching?
Yes.
Is it at, with the vegetation and the elevation?
Yes, sir.
Now, if I could move to introduce those as the next number collected exhibit, I believe 18. There's three, Your Honor, and put those up for the, I don't think they just need to, with the court's permission, to put the, on the TV. And I believe that is going to be A, and so this is you, correct?
Yes, sir.
And when you mentioned, talked about raid gear, just for the sake of it, is that what you were describing?
That's what I was trying to describe.
Without the jacket?
Yes.
All right. And now, could you describe, we can see the picture, but could you just describe this wooded area?
So this is at the end of Spruceville Lane, which is I believe they're like condos, I believe. And there's a dead end, and after the dead end, there's a hill that goes up. And I'm kind of staying on that hill. Then after that hill, it kind of goes up into the woods, which will slowly start going up another hill.
And you recall what the weather was like, both on Sunday and Monday?
It was raining on and off the whole time.
You should put the next one. I'm sorry. And is this that same general area?
Yes, sir.
And who are these?
The one with the gold on it, that is me, and then the other one, I think that is the crime scene tech, maybe a sergeant on there.
I was going to say, were these photographs taken after Mr. Reinking was taken into custody?
Yes, sir.
Right. And then the last one. This is, again, the view of the type of vegetation. How far could you see when you're in there?
When you're in, what I recall, 50 feet or so in front of you. I mean, you might have, like, the area where I originally walked, there was like a small trail, so you can see a little ways in front of you. But where this is at, it's off the trail, and so it was a lot harder to see.
Okay. And as you were searching, would you on occasion stop and listen?
Yes.
To see if you heard movement?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I'm through with those. Sergeant, I believe when we left off before the pictures, you had said that you chose what appeared to be the path most traveled.
Yes, sir.
And who took the path that was less traveled?
I know Detective Kyle Williams was one, and I'm not sure who else, because me and Detective Gray who went in first.
And did you find anything as you were going down the trail that you chose?
No, sir.
I believe I interrupted you that you heard something come over the radio.
Yeah, so over the radio, I heard Detective Kyle Williams say he had contact, which to me, I knew that he had contact with an individual. Whether it was the individual we were searching for, we didn't know, but he had contact with an individual. And then he said he needed backup, like code 3, which to us is in a hurry. And so at that point, I figured he probably had the individual we were looking for. And then another short period of time goes by, and we were going to him at this point, but we were a little distance away from him. And that about time goes by, and I hear him say he's in custody.
So you're on the trail.
Yes, sir.
Heading away, as it turns out, from Officer Williams.
Yes, sir.
You hear him, he needs backup.
Yes, sir.
Did you turn around and head for him as quickly as you could?
Yeah, so Detective Greg and I, then we tried to cut down through the woods, and we walked down through the woods until we finally found a clearing, at which point we walked back northbound along the tree line until we ran into where they were at.
What did you observe when you got to the clearing? Did you see Officer Williams?
I don't recall where exactly Officer Williams was at this point, but by the time I got there, we walked a little ways. By the time I got there, I walked up and there was one of the guys in our building through the Specialized Investigation Division in interdiction. He had his vehicle there, which had capabilities to transport people. And in the back of his car was who I identified as Mr. Reinking.
Okay. So, did you see Mr. Reinking in the wooded area?
I did not.
Okay.
He was.
Just to be clear about that.
Correct.
He'd already been removed from the wooded area.
Yes, he's already been removed from the wood area. He was sitting in the back passenger side of a interdiction vehicle.
Did you get close enough to observe his physical appearance?
Yes, I did. So part of what I did I went over there, opened up the door, and I observed him just to essentially check his welfare at that point.
Okay. What do you recall, if anything, about his appearance, his demeanor, actions?
So very calm. Opened up the door, I looked at him. I noticed he had on the maroon shirt, which was told to me as a long sleeve maroon shirt. I also noticed on his right shoulder, the shirt was torn. I could see some small scratches along his right shoulder, which to me was consistent with going through the thick brush. His pants appeared to look wet, and he just kind of sat there and looked at the ground or looked straight forward.
Okay, when you say the ground, the
floorboard of the vehicle.
And you didn't have any conversation with him?
No, sir.
Okay. And you recall about what time of the afternoon this was?
I think it was around 1 p.m., 1:30, somewhere around, it was around 1 p.m. Not exact sure.
Have you have a moment, Trevor? Those are my questions, Your Honor.
No questions.
Thank you, Sergeant.
Thank you, sir.
State called Special Agent Kyle Williams. If you would raise your right hand if you want, please. Good morning, sir. Would you please state and spell your name?
Kyle Williams, K-Y-L-E, Williams, W-I-L-L-I-A-M-S.
And where are you currently employed?
I'm a special agent with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives.
And how long have you been a law enforcement officer?
Over 10 years total.
Where did you work prior to being with the ATF?
Metro Nashville Police Department.
And when you were in April of 2018, what was your assignment with the police department, the Nashville Police Department?
I was assigned to the Specialized Investigations Division, Narcotics Unit.
And what was your, title or rank?
Detective.
Okay. Were you at some point in time asked to get involved in a mass shooting that occurred on at a Waffle House on April 22nd, 2018?
Yes, sir.
And how were you notified to become involved?
Via phone call.
About what time did you receive the phone call?
Some in the morning time around 8, maybe 8:30.
And what was your role in that investigation?
We were tasked to answer calls for service of possible sightings, go door to door, seeing if any of the residents had seen the suspect.
What areas did you search?
All the way from Mountain Springs to Hickory Hollow, Parkway, townhome communities across the street and above the Waffle House, pretty much all of South Nashville, some of Hermitage.
And what exactly were you doing as you're searching for him?
Walking in wood lines, answering possible sightings, trying to make contact with those people that saw who they believed to be the suspect.
How many times did you have to stop and get out of your car to go look behind something or in some particular area?
An honest answer, I couldn't tell you, but between that Sunday prior to running into Mr. Reinking in the woods, it was all day that Sunday, and then up until Monday afternoon, we were going around.
Okay, so what you're saying is you searched for him all day Sunday, but didn't find him.
Correct.
And about what time did you start back your search on that Monday, the 23rd?
Monday morning, we were tasked to come in at 8 a.m. to start over.
And did you begin the same kind of efforts?
Yes, answering calls for possible sightings.
At some point in time, did you begin to head to an area which would ultimately lead you into contact with him?
Yes, we were en route to another call, possible sighting across South Nashville side over near Mount View. And then our lieutenant came on the radio and said the sighting has been seen near Mountain Springs. And so our team turned around due to, I believe, both SWAT teams and aviation were on the other call. So we turned and went to the other one.
Had you received any briefings about the individual you were searching for?
Yes, I knew that a search warrant was executed on his apartment and a firearm was missing from the apartment. So I knew that he was armed and had obviously been on the run since the incident at the Waffle House.
And why would that be important to you, that he was armed?
It changes how you would approach an individual. If you knowingly had information that he was armed, you go at it a little differently than just walking on him. You're more prepared. You have an idea that they could harm you, knowingly harm you due to them having a weapon.
Okay. So when you received this information about a specific area to search on April 23rd, about what time was it that occurred?
I think the call was just before 1 o'clock, somewhere around there.
Okay. And what did you do once you received the call?
The call was at I guess it's a TVA area, an area between an apartment complex and the wood line. So my sergeant and other team members went to where the person saw the individual go into the woods. Seeing how many people were up at the top, I knew based on the day prior being in the townhome community at the bottom of the hill that that wood line leads to the townhome community. So I drove to Sprucedale and went into the townhome community to walk the wood line heading up to my team.
And did anyone enter the wood line with you? And by with you, I mean basically walking beside you, right behind you, right before you?
No, the only person that was close to me was Detective Gomez. He came over to where my car was parked. I let him know I was going into the wood line where I was and that he could go a little further up, just around the corner, so we could cover more distance.
Did you enter the wood line?
Yes.
And how far into the wood line did you begin to walk?
Approximately 50 yards from the wood line into the woods.
About half a football field?
Roughly, yes, sir.
Okay. When once you got about 50 yards into the wood line, what, if anything, did you observe or hear?
Well, the woods themselves, there was leaves on the ground, so, and twigs and branches, so when you walk, you can hear them breaking and moving. So I got approximately 50 yards in and stopped, and then I heard an additional breaking and crunching of leaves, so that drew my attention.
And what did you do once you heard the breaking and crunching of leaves?
Due to the foliage above, I couldn't really make out what it was, so I crouched down and observed a black pair of pants behind a tree.
Once you observed the black pair of pants, did you do anything?
I did. Police officers give each other a call sign to let them know of each other's presence, so there's no force on force between officers. I gave that call and didn't receive the response that we would have received.
What did you do next?
Knowing that it was not police, I made myself known. Metro Police, show me your hands. I had my gun out of the holster at that point. When I did that, I rose as I was saying Metro Police and observed Mr. Reinking's head pop out from behind a tree.
And sorry, I just want to step back to clarify. You said, I'm not asking you to tell me what the call sign was, but when you say you gave him a call sign, what does that mean?
It alerts them to my presence, and then they give the same response, so I'm alerted that it is police as well.
And the call sign is a phrase or a word?
It's a word.
Okay. And you didn't hear that in response?
That's correct.
Did you have anything, how were you dressed when you saw him?
Underneath my clearly marked police vest, I was in normal clothes due to my role as a narcotics detective. But our vest itself is marked with Metro Police on the front, Metro Police on the back. It's black in color. I don't remember what I was wearing underneath it.
Okay. Now, you were saying that you rose and stated and identified yourself as a police officer.
That's correct. Yes,
And what do you remember the specific words you said?
Metro Police.
When you said you saw a head pop out from behind a tree, were you able to see his entire body at that time?
No, his head and shoulder area is what I could see.
At that point in time, once you saw the head of Mr. Reinking pop out, what did you do, if anything?
Drew my gun on him and gave him commands to show me his hands.
And the person who you saw behind the tree, do you see him in the courtroom here today?
Yes, he's sitting at defense counsel in a blue shirt.
After you drew your gun, what, if anything, did the defendant do?
The defendant, I could see one hand. His right hand began moving behind his body as if he was reaching for something.
Your Honor, I asked that the witness be able to step down and show the jury exactly what he means.
So if he is giving me, or if I am giving him commands, I would be him now. He started reaching behind his person, as if, in my training and experience, I would do with my firearm when I'm drawing it to qualify to range or take a person into custody.
Thank you. And just to be clear for the record, when you were indicating what the defendant did you reach with your right hand?
Yes.
And when you were showing what you would do when you reached with for your firearm, did you reach with your left hand?
Yes, I am left-handed.
As you saw the defendant reaching with his right hand in the way that you just showed the jury, what, if anything, were you concerned that he might be doing?
Like I stated earlier, I knew based off the search warrant at his apartment, a firearm was missing. So I believe that he possibly was reaching for that firearm.
Have you had any training or an experience in apprehending armed suspects?
Yes, sir.
And based on what you observed and your experience, could you tell us, well, based on your training experience, how quickly can an individual remove a weapon from a concealed location and fire it?
A weapon can be removed relatively quick from a concealed location, depending if it's appendix carry or on his hip or behind his person. It increases or decreases the time in which a weapon can be drawn.
Now, you mentioned earlier that when you first heard the crunching of the leaves and the branches, that you were crouched down. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that you stood up once you gave him the command, Metro Police.
Yes, sir.
Once you stood up, were you protected or covered in any way by any of the trees that would have given you cover as you stood?
There were smaller branches, not any concealment or cover. I was basically out in the open.
You testified that the defendant was, when you first observed him, he was partially behind a tree. Would that tree have provided him some cover?
It would have provided him some cover, yes, sir.
Now, after you saw the defendant, as you have described, reach in a manner consistent with someone who was reaching for a gun, what, if anything, did you do or say?
I gave him an additional order for him to show me his hands, at which point he brought his right hand back around empty with nothing in his hands.
If he had not done that, what were you prepared to do?
I was prepared to act in defense of myself and prevent any possible person in the town-owned community or in the South Nashville community from being hurt again.
After the second command, did he comply with your orders?
He did.
What did he do?
He showed me his hands, raised them just above his shoulders, while looking at me holding my firearm on his person.
Did you give him any further commands as he was on the ground?
Yes, I told him to lie on the ground with his hands out in front of him. Usually we put them to the side, but due to the foliage, I had him put them out in front of him.
Did you direct him not to move?
I told him not to move.
And did he move?
He did not move.
Did he indicate that he was aware to you in any way that he understood when you said do not move, that he was not to move?
I told him multiple times, do not move. And one of the times he said, I will not.
Did he ever attempt to flee from you?
He did not.
After you had him on the ground, did you communicate to any other officers?
Yes, over the radio, I knew Officer or Detective Gomez was the only one aware of my actual position. So I told him to come to where I was, and then other people in my unit also directed them to where I was so we could place him into custody.
In your experience in law enforcement, have you ever had a suspect who you're placing into custody resist or pull away or anything like that?
Yes, I have.
Is that a common practice?
Depends on what they're wanted for.
Did that happen in this particular case?
No, sir, it did not.
Once you received some backup, were you able to put him in handcuffs?
Yes.
What did he have on his body, if anything?
During the search of his person, there was a magazine for a firearm, a multi-tool, and his wallet.
Did he have a backpack on him?
And there was a backpack on his back, which was later cut off his person.
Were you able to identify him at his identity?
Yes.
Were you able to confirm his identity is the question.
Yes, inside of his wallet, there was a Colorado ID with his picture and name on it.
Your Honor, I'd ask to pass up a group of pictures. I've already provided a copy to defense. Yeah. And Special Agent Williams, can you look through those pictures and tell me whether those are a fair and accurate depiction of the area where you located defendant?
Yes, sir, they are.
I'd ask that those be introduced as it's Exhibit 19, A through G, and permission to publish them via PowerPoint. Special Agent Williams, I'm showing you what is 19A. What is this area here?
That is the woods in which Mr. Reinking was taken into custody.
Okay. And 19B?
A different angle, the larger tree more towards the left of center was the one in which Mr. Reinking was behind.
And you can touch that. Could you just circle the tree you're referring to?
Just with my finger?
Yeah, with your finger. And where about would his head have been?
That is when I took him into custody standing up.
When you saw him standing up. And what is 19C?
That is the backpack which was taken off his person and the firearm laying to the side. That was after it was taken off his person and went through by detectives.
19D?
That is the wallet and multi-tool that was inside or on his person during the arrest.
19E?
The Colorado license, which I referred to earlier.
Say G. Sorry, can I see the exhibit? Sorry, it's A through E. Yes. We only publish what we admitted. Special Agent Williams, did you see the defendant be removed from the wooded area?
I did.
And what officers or detectives removed him?
There were 3 that removed him from the wooded area: Detective Gomez, Detective Rogan, and Officer Herndon.
As the defendant was being walked out with those officers that you just named, did you see him make any attempts to break away from them?
I did not.
Did you see any attempts by him to resist?
I did not.
Have you had any training and experience on how to respond to and interact with persons who have mental illnesses?
I have.
Have you had prior experiences and interactions with mentally ill people in your duties as a law enforcement officer?
Yes, sir.
If Mr. Reinking had been exhibiting any signs of suffering from mental illness during your interaction with him, what, if anything, would you have done differently?
Based off my experience with mental ill persons prior.
Objection. Objection.
Come forward. Sustained, rephrase.
Yes. Special Agent Williams, was there anything during your interaction with the defendant that alerted you, that made you think during your specific interaction that the defendant was experiencing symptoms of a mental illness?
No, sir.
Thank you. 1 second, John.
Judge, may we request a jury out?
Remember, the jury, apparently we're gonna have an issue that's gonna take a little bit longer than the typical, rulings that the court may have to make, so rather than maybe just sit there with that, white noise, playing beautiful music in your ear, we're gonna let you take a recess. Please keep in mind, you cannot discuss anything about the trial of the case. Keep your thoughts to yourself, remain open minded, we'll get you back in here as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Judge. Obviously, because of the protocols, I was not privy to the bench conference that just occurred. The state's position is that the witness can give a lay opinion about what they observed related to Mr. Reinking. That lay opinion is, the question that General Dowdy was asking was a foundational question of based on your training and experience. So he's asking him about whether or not he has experience with people with mental illnesses, and then in those situations, how do you treat them differently to differentiate the two things? The state's position is that we should be able to allow to ask further questions about his prior experiences with people with mental illness to give context to how he's able to differentiate between the two.
The problem that I saw when the question was is that it was so broad. First of all, not everybody has the same mental illness. Secondly, not everybody behaves the same way. Third, there was nothing displayed in this situation. So certainly he can talk about some experiences that he may have had, and not all people with mental illnesses, when taken into custody, exhibit any behaviors different than he did. And I don't know how he knows when they have a mental illness. Does he learn about that after he's taken in booking, and the sheriff's office asking about it? I just thought it was way overbroad, the way it was worded to do that. I understand that lay testimony and opinions are absolutely admissible in a case of this nature, but I just felt the question just was wide open. And what was he going to do? Get a psychology course or something? That's the way I was looking at it.
Absolutely understood. So if we
better refine, I am not at all preventing the state from introducing evidence as to possible mental illness and any exhibition on his behalf that was suggested in any way whatsoever. But just open-ended, broad questions about mental illness and how I might deal with them in a certain situation is, I think, can be very misleading to the jury as it relates to Mr. Reinking under the circumstances that existed when he was apprehended.
Okay. Would he be allowed to ask him some more foundational questions about?
Well, let's go down and see what they are before we bring the jury back out.
Special Agent Williams, what experiences have you had with individuals who have mental illness?
Transports to and from Middle Tennessee Mental Health Co-op in different mental health institutes within the Middle District of Tennessee, as well as interactions with persons who have self-admittedly been either committed to or proclaim mental health crises on the street.
And have you had any interaction, have you had any interaction with individuals who have schizophrenia?
Yes, prior to leaving the police department to go to my current position, dealt with an individual at Middle Tennessee Mental Health Co-op.
Can you describe the interactions that you had with those individuals who you were transporting to the mental health co-op who had mental illness?
The prior interaction, which I described, it's like talking with two people, one that was understanding and one that wasn't. One that had an idea of actual reality and one that had an idea of what he perceived us and the persons at the co-op as being different from what we actually were.
And I guess, what do you mean he perceived them to be different?
In his head, he believed it wholeheartedly. One part of him wanted to fight us, one part of him wanted help, and it was a constant battle and discussion with him for 30, 40 minutes, try to talk him into getting in the ambulance so we could get him some help.
And it was the talking to him to convince him to get into the ambulance, was that part of what you've been trained to do when dealing with an individual who is displaying symptoms of a mental illness?
I build rapport with him and him. I did that day. I was a sergeant at the time, so I responded later. And for whatever reason, me just talking to him and going off my training, he reacted in a positive manner towards me, and we were able to get him some help.
Now, because you had that prior experience, if Mr. Reinking, the defendant, had been displaying similar symptoms, would you have reacted similarly to him?
There would have been knowing that he had a firearm, it increases the danger of the situation. But he complied in the manner in which I asked him to. But if he was experiencing the symptoms, going back and forth and not dealing with commands, knowing that he had a firearm, or if he produced a firearm, it would have been handled differently. But the way in which it was handled, his compliance to the commands, it was handled how I thought it needed to be handled.
One second, John, please. Special Agent Williams, when law enforcement officers, and specifically you, and officers who you've worked with on your team, interact with individuals who are expressing outwardly, say, delusions, they're ranting, they're raving, doing things that give you clear concern of a mental illness, would you attempt to transport them to the mental health co-op?
We, in the past, have called mental health co-op directly while we're on scene with them, giving them updates of what is transpiring, have them make a call to have him transported, and then we usually have more people there to lessen any violent response on their behalf.
And would it be proper procedure to note any of that behavior in any incident or supplement reports that you would prepare?
Yes, sir.
Would you expect that from any and all officers who would have prepared a report after having such an interaction with such an individual.
Yes, the demeanor should be reported in a report. And in the interaction itself, if they're being evaluated at the mental health co-op or any psychological or psychology facility that they're wanting him transported to.
Your Honor, those are our questions that, to establish the foundation, that those are the questions we'd like to ask, especially as a witness.
We would object. He's asking him to speculate and give opinions about incidences that did not occur. If these things had happened, what would you have done? If he would have exhibited this, what would you have done? And would you have expected your other officers to act in a similar fashion? He is told Mr. Reinking's demeanor at the time of the arrest. That goes into the exact thing they're trying to do, which is say, what was his demeanor? A layperson's observation. It's immediately suspect when they say this is a layperson's observation when they have to build a foundation about his experience. They're not trying to get in a layperson's observations of Mr. Reinking's mental status. What they're trying to do is backdoor in a quasi-expert opinion about his mental state at the time. And based on this testimony, they're making relevant every officer interaction afterwards, including him being hospitalized by court order and being found incompetent. I mean, they're walking down that road, Your Honor, and this is not relevant. He's testified to what he observed. He's not allowed to backdoor in some kind of a not valid but quasi-expert opinion.
And Your Honor, his prior experiences that he's had will always be relevant in terms of how he interacted with the defendant. And that is the purpose of his testimony. What is it that, based on his knowledge, his experience, his training, did he believe was appropriate to do when he was interacting with Mr. Reinking? And because Mr. Reinking was not exhibiting those things, he can explain why he dealt with him in the way that he did. That's why it makes sense.
But the question, that line of argument presupposes that he knew Mr. Reinking may have mental health issues. Because why would it even enter his mind to treat him like a mental health person if he had no reason to believe he was?
Well, but he would have had reason to have concern that he was if Mr. Reinking was exhibiting such behavior. With his testimony, and every officer I imagine who could ever come into any courtroom and testify would say that their actions are based in part or almost wholly due to the actions of the suspect that they're interacting with. If Mr. Reinking is exhibiting such delusional behavior, such clear behavior, that he seems to be someone that is experiencing an episode or symptoms of mental illness, then he is going to change his actions in response to those.
Well, that may be true, and it may be. I mean, who knows what he might have done? If he has someone who is exhibiting clear signs of delusional behavior, known to have a weapon on his person, he might be dead in the woods. I mean, the speculation as to how he would have handled a particular situation that he was not confronted with on that occasion, where he's already stated that I handled the situation different because I knew he was armed or believed him to be armed, kind of overrode what possible mental health issues may have arisen. The problem I see is, first of all, he was unaware that there were mental health issues. You can ask about his training and experience on mental health issues. You can ask, did he exhibit any of those type of behaviors? You can ask him what his training and the police protocol is on how they handle people with mental health issues. That none of those came into play. But I'm not going to let you speculate as to how he might have dealt with Mr. Reinking on this occasion had Mr. Reinking been delusional and exhibited delusional behaviors in light of the fact that he was also believed to be armed with a weapon, because his main concern was armed with a weapon. he made that very clear. I would have treated it differently because he was armed with a weapon.
Understood, sir.
So you can get into his experiences and you can get into the fact that Mr. Reinking did not exhibit any of those and he had no reason to believe. I mean, you can talk about when we have people that we know are mental health, we take them to mental health. He keeps saying that Middle Tennessee Mental Health Co-op, you mean Middle Tennessee Mental Health Institute, MTMHI, the hospital?
Yes, sir, there's.
There's that co-op too,
Yes, sir.
often comes on, is called in. I mean, you can get into his training on that and what they look for to see if a person may have mental health illnesses. When they have reason to look for them, do you look for them every time you, confronted with a suspect? Is mental health the first thing you look to?
No, sir.
And that's my point, is that yes.
Judge, I think you're without even that last statement that you said in question.
Well, my point is, and Sergeant just indicated, or Special Agent now, that they don't automatically take into consideration that a person has a mental health issue. So you can ask how they address one when they have reason to believe that they have mental health issues, not how they would respond necessarily to a specific behaviors, but what are the protocols? Do they call in mental health people and things of that nature? And then nothing on this particular occasion suggested to him there was a need to do any of that.
Yes, sir.
But no speculations as how he might have treated Mr. Reinking in light of his experience with some other person who had schizophrenia. Since for one, he didn't know that Mr. Reinking had that. May or may not still to this day. But I'm not going to let you speculate as to how he might have dealt with it. You can go over his experiences and how protocols that they have in the academy, in the police department on how to address these issues when mental health issue is known or reasonably suspected.
Yes, sir.
Anything else from the defense?
No, you're right.
All right. You understand where I'm going?
Yes, sir.
Say it, please.
You ready for the jury, Judge?
Yes.
That's what I have. I got on in May of last year. Yes, sir.
Anyway.
It's good. Been down in Georgia for several months.
Was that where you were?
Or I was in training.
Oh,
And then I'm here in Nashville until I go to Memphis.
What special area are you in?
As far as, I'm not doing explosives or arson, it's just firearms basically.
Right.
Criminal groups and gangs and things like that, yes, sir.
You ready? All right, PC, please. I believe members of the jury that we're ready to pick back up.
Special Agent Williams, would you please explain what kind of training you as a law enforcement officer have received with regard to addressing individuals or suspects who are displaying behaviors or actions that would give you concern that they may have a mental illness?
At the Metro Nashville Police Department Training Academy, at least when I was coming through, over 10 years ago, there was training from mental health co-op on signs that you can look out for persons exhibiting mental health issues. And then I believe it was yearly or every other year, there was refresher training during our in-service of signs and ways to handle persons in a mental health crisis.
What are some of the signs that you were trained to look for?
Talking to themselves, just not acting in a normal, I say normal way. It's just experiencing delusions. There's various things that can be going on, yelling, screaming, delusions of real world issues, just not being very aware of what's going on in today's world, just different things.
And when an officer, based on the training that you receive, when you encounter an individual, this is general, not specific, general, what are you trained to do when you encounter an individual who is acting or behaving in a way that makes you concerned that they have a mental illness?
Depending on the signs that you observe, usually you would try to get in touch with mobile crisis. Mobile crisis is a unit that can come out to where you are, or they ask you to transport them to their office based off your observations. And if the person that you're talking with is open to communication with the person on the phone, they have a conversation with the person and then make a determination whether or not they are going to come to where you are or if that individual needs to be brought to them.
And have you had any specific encounters where you did have to call mobile crisis as a result of the behaviors or actions of an individual or suspect that you encountered?
Me, I personally have not called them, but I've been on scene in which they were called.
Okay. And in those instances, did you observe the behavior that led to the mobile health, the mobile crisis or mental health co-op being contacted to come in?
Yes.
When an officer observes such behavior, would you be required to document that in any incident reports or supplement reports that you prepared in response to that interaction?
They can be documented. There's for Metro Nashville Police Department, there is a psychological eval report or a matter of record or a supplement if something else occurs, which can document the call for service.
Okay. Now, 1 second. Special Agent Williams, on April 23rd, 2018, when you interacted with Mr. Reinking, the defendant, did he display any of the behaviors or actions that gave any behaviors or actions that gave you concerns that he had a mental illness?
No, he did not.
Please describe his demeanor.
His demeanor was one of shock initially when we both encountered each other. After the shock wore off, he was compliant, following commands, maintaining visual contact with me. Once he stood up, before he was walked out of the woods, he hung his head, didn't make any statements, and that was my interaction with him.
Those are my questions.
Well,
check the time, make sure I'm accurate. Here we go. Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
So, couple of questions. I want to go back. Well, before I do that, let me ask you this. About how long of a period of time were you around Mr. Reinking that morning?
Between the time that we first encountered each other until he was walked out of the woods away from my view, rough estimate, maybe a total of 30 minutes, if even over near 30 minutes. I'm just giving a general time.
Okay. So, you said you encountered Mr. Reinking. You could see his head through foliage in the woods, correct?
Yes.
You said he had a backpack on.
Yes.
Right. Now, you gave a demonstration earlier for the jury about how you said when Mr. Reinking stuck his head out, you saw him move his hand, his right hand, you were using your left, but his right hand around, and I think you described it something along the lines of like I would do if I was qualifying for firearms training.
Yes.
Now, when you're qualifying for firearms training, where are you pulling your gun from?
It depends on the qualification. If we're doing it from concealment, it's still my hip.
Okay.
All of it's from the hip, but it's concealed or not concealed, depending on how we're qualified.
Okay. But you're doing it from a holster, whether it's concealed from a concealed carry holster or a concealed holster from your hip or like a paddle holster on your side, right?
Yes, sir. It's all from the side.
And then you talked about something about, you were asked about how quick can somebody pull a firearm, and I think you said, well, it depends on how they're carrying it, right?
Yes, sir.
And can you talk about a couple of different ways? You talked about appendix and different areas of the body, remember that?
Yes, sir.
Just to be clear, when you say appendix, how does somebody carry it?
That would be in the front of their waistband.
Okay, so not to the side of their body or behind their body.
Correct.
Okay. You talked about items that were on Mr. Reinking's person, right? Before we get into the backpack, let's start outside the backpack, in his pockets, on his belt. Did he have any kind of a holster in his pockets or behind, in his pants?
No.
All right, so the firearm that you say you recovered, that was not in his pockets or in his waistband or any kind of holster in his pants at that time, correct?
The firearm was not on his immediate person. Correct.
Right. And the backpack, when it was cut off of Mr. Reinking, it was zipped, right? It was closed.
I just had my interaction with him and other detectives, and ID took care of the backpack.
Okay. But you identified a picture, but you do, when you first, you're the one that took him into custody.
Yes.
First one there, backpack's zipped up on his back.
Yes.
Okay. You later learn that there's a firearm in the zipped up part of the backpack, correct?
Yes, sir.
You did not know that initially, of course.
No. Yes, sir. No.
But it was not back here, where he was swinging his arm. You said he put his arm around at the beginning. That firearm was not in any kind of reachable position from where he swung his hands, correct?
Later determined that, yes, that's correct.
Okay. You said he was compliant, correct?
Yes, sir.
One moment. No other questions?
Redirect?
No.
Thank you. Thank you, Special Agent.
Thank you, sir.
Who is your next witness and about how long it takes? Can we get him in before lunch?
Yes, sir.
All right.
You might say noon.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. The next witness is Detective Megan Arnett.
I'm sorry?
Detective Megan Arnett.
Oh.
If you would raise your right hand, which one, please? Solemnly swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Good morning, Detective. Would you please state your name and spell it?
Megan Arnett, MEGANARNETT,
And where are you employed?
Metro Nashville Police Department.
What's your role there?
My current role, I'm a field training officer on patrol out in South.
Oh, sorry, not detective, officer.
I was a detective at the time of the incident.
That was what I was going to get to later.
Sorry.
And the incident that we're talking about is April 22nd, 23rd of 2018.
Yes.
Okay. And how did you get involved?
At that time, I was assigned to the narcotics unit with Metro Nashville Police Department, and we got called in to help with assisting the search of Mr. Reinking.
What was as you assisted in the search, what exactly were you doing?
We were given information when the public would call in and have possible sightings of where Mr. Reinking might be, so we would respond to multiple different locations trying to locate the subject.
As you were attempting to locate the suspects, what exactly were you doing?
They had sent out information and pictures of what Mr. Reinking looked like, and we would just check the areas depending on if it was behind buildings, inside, locations like a Publix, things of that nature, kind of all over the South Nashville area.
How long did you spend in your search on Sunday, April 22nd?
I believe I got in around 1 or 2 p.m. We got called in. I was actually out of town initially. So once I got into town, we stayed until, I know, into dark. I'm not sure the exact time, maybe 10 or 11. And then we were told to come back in the next morning.
And how about on Monday, the 23rd?
I cannot recall the exact time. I want to say it was around 6 a.m. And then we had just started answering those type of calls that were coming in that whole day as well.
What areas were you searching?
The South Nashville, Antioch, and Hermitage area.
At some point in time around, I guess, midday of the 23rd, did you receive any information that the defendant, Travis Reinking, had been located?
We had gotten information or a tip that was saying they believed he had went into a wood line near 5,000 Mountain Springs. At that point, Sergeant Briner, as well as I think it was Detective Greg, responded and made contact with the tipster, who advised that he'd went into the wood line in that area, and so then I responded to basically the opposite side of the wood line.
And once you responded in the wood line, what, if anything, did you learn about what was going on?
I'd actually initially responded to the Old Hickory Boulevard side, and then once I was getting to that area, I heard Detective, now Special Agent Williams, claim or get over the radio stating that he had located the subject inside the wood line, advised us he was just inside the wood line in front of his vehicle on Sprucedale. So at that point, I responded to that side of onto Sprucedale.
Did you enter the wood line?
I did. Once we got to that location, I went up basically directly up the hill into the wood line from where Detective Williams' vehicle was. At that point, I saw Reinking's
prone out on the ground and was actively being handcuffed by other detectives.
What was the weather like?
It had been the day prior raining a lot and it had been off and on raining the whole time.
Was the ground wet?
Yes.
Where was the defendant, Mr. Reinking, at when you encountered him?
He was still prone out on the ground.
What does prone mean?
Laying face down. At that point, they were already handcuffing him. Normally, we have subjects prone out with their hands out where we can see them, just in case they have any type of weapons or anything on them. But at that point, they were already working into handcuffing him.
You observed the other officers putting his arms behind his back to handcuff him?
Yes.
At any time while you were watching him, did he attempt to pull his arms away?
Not that I observed, but at that point, I'd kind of turned around to try to figure out our exact location so that I could get more response to the location.
What if anything, did you notice to be in his possession?
At that point, I still observed a black backpack that was on his back.
What happened to the backpack?
Once we got him up off of the ground, or at least set up, we decided to cut off of his backpack since he was already handcuffed and it was around his arms on his back.
Once you cut off the backpack, what happened with it?
They set it down next to him. At that point, command had requested us to check the backpack to see if he had any type of weapons on him. At that point, Sergeant Briner instructed me, since I was not dealing with the subject and had gloves and stuff available in my kit, that I put on gloves and opened up the backpack to check if there was any sort of weapons inside the backpack.
Okay. And did you actually look in the backpack?
I did. So once I opened up the backpack, I observed a silver Kimber 45 caliber that was loaded, and the hammer was pulled back like it was ready to fire.
And Officer Arnett, I'm going to pass the control to provide a copy to defense. Would you please look through those and see if they are a fair and accurate depiction of the backpack and its contents as you saw them on April 23rd, 2018?
Yes, they are.
Your Honor, I ask that you made exhibit number 20. It's a composite exhibit, so the A through G.
A through G?
Yes.
Is this the real G?
It's the real A through G this time, Judge, yes. Officer Arnett, I'm showing you what is 20A. Is this the backpack that was cut off the back of Travis Reinking?
Yes, it is.
And do you see Travis Reinking in the courtroom today?
I do.
Could you please identify him?
He's over there with the defense in a blue button-up.
Okay. And so is that the backpack that you searched through on April 23rd?
It is.
What does 20B show?
It shows a Bible that was in the backpack, as well as a flashlight and a box of ammunition.
What about 20C?
That is the firearm that was inside the backpack.
Did the firearm appear to have a magazine in it when you saw it?
What I recall, yes.
And I think you stated that the gun was cocked or something like that. What does that mean?
So on this type of firearm, it has a hammer on the back and it was pulled back.
You can touch the screen
right here.
And what does that mean?
It's just another level of, so depending on the type of firearm, it has it where it's ready to, when they pull trigger, the hammer will move forward and hit the primer and shoot the gun.
So that gun, if it was loaded, would be ready to fire.
Correct.
Okay, 20D. Is this the same weapon on top of the backpack?
Yes, it is.
And is that a magazine here?
Yes, it appears to be one that would go with that firearm.
Alright. And 20E?
That is a holster, a gun, firearm holster, more ammunition, as well as some silver, what I believe to be silver bars.
And I'm gonna circle what I believe the holster you're referring to is that correct?
Yes.
What do you see here?
Boxes of ammunition, gold bars, or sorry, silver bars.
And would you point to where the silver bars are, or just kind of put a line by them? All right. 20G, what are those?
Water bottles.
And do you know if those items were taken in, collected and taken into evidence?
To my knowledge, yes. I stood by with the items until the ID got there to collect the items.
And did he have any thing on his actual person?
I know the other detectives took something off, but I do not know for sure what all items were taken off of this person.
Understood. Officer Arnett, what was the defendant's demeanor as you observed him that day?
He appeared to be compliant, but like I said, I didn't really deal with him that much. I saw that they had taken him into custody and handled, so then at that point I was trying to get our exact location. I went out and asked someone that lived there like what their address was to get more response, and then at that point I stayed with the backpack.
Those are my questions, Your Honor.
Good morning.
Morning.
So just wanted to follow up on a few things that you talked about. You talked a little bit about Mr. Reinking's demeanor. You said you weren't around him for all that long. About how long would you say you were around him total that morning?
I would say approximately around him, 30 minutes or more, but I was not dealing with him directly. I was doing other tasks.
Okay. So around him, so you would say the amount of time you may have been actually observing him would have been even less than that 30 minutes, correct? Okay. The backpack, from the pictures, and it appears to be wet through and through. Is that accurate?
I had gloves on. I mean, you could appear that it was wet, but I don't know about through and through. I mean, it was wet, definitely, but it was also had been raining and everything.
Yeah. But like the cartridge boxes, the Hornady cartridge boxes, specifically on, I think it's Exhibit 20B, they appear to be wet, correct?
Yes, sir.
The firearm itself, Exhibit 20C, it was wet as well, is that correct?
From that picture, it appeared to be wet, but like I said, it was still inside the backpack. ID is the ones that removed all of the items.
Okay. And so when we talked about earlier, you said, and specifically I think on Exhibit 20C, that the hammer on the firearm was pulled back.
Correct.
And circled it. Did you actually handle the firearm to try to render it safe or take any steps in that direction?
No, I did not.
All right, so these pictures that you looked at, who actually, well, let me ask it this way, are you the one that actually removed the firearm, sat it down, and snapped these pictures?
No, that would have been ID.
Okay. When you looked in the backpack, did you handle the firearm at all?
I didn't pick it up. I may have moved it out of the way just to see what else was in there, but it was laying and pointed upward.
Okay, so literally you didn't even move it out of the backpack. You looked in, saw that the hammer was cocked back?
Correct.
And just took note of everything in the backpack?
Correct.
You also said there was a holster in the backpack, correct?
Yes.
the firearm was not in the holster, is that correct?
No, it was not.
And I think on the first picture, maybe, or excuse me, 20B, you noted that there was a Bible. Is that right?
Yes.
Redirect. Thank you, officer.
Thank you, Your Honor.
We're getting close to the noon hour on the road and possibly push over into their lunch that's being delivered. We'll go ahead and recess for lunch at this time. Remember, Jerry's, go on back there, relax, and enjoy your lunch. We'll get you back in here between 10 to 1 and 1 o'clock. Please again, keep in mind, they not discuss anything about the trial case. You can talk to yourself, or they don't remind you. Anything we need to address before we recess?
No, Your Honor.
All